technology has just transformed everything. And if we didn't believe that, then there was COVID, right? And it forced a lot of people to really make some adaptations for a more technologically advanced way of doing things. I once heard, Kevin, that anything we learn about that is researched and published and discovered in an educational institution, higher education. I was a university prof for 14 years. In that world, even though it is discovered, it takes 30 years to be implemented in the workplace, in the classroom, and those things. We have taken that 30 years and just compressed it with COVID and said, well, what we would have taken 30 years to implement, we're implementing aggressively now. And so I think because of that, we are taking technological advances that would have been slowly adopted through workplaces that serve individuals who maybe are unable to do certain tasks. And now they're able to be right up and be able to work and do certain things that before people may have thought, well, I don't think you're a great candidate for this because here are the reasons why. Because of these technological advances and because we're accepting them so rapidly now as norm, then that allows individuals who beforehand might not have been considered for candidacy are now in a much better spot. So I think these technologies that we're seeing, and then they're all over the place from one end of the spectrum to the other. Those technologies are allowing individuals who before were not given a shot to have a shot, and that's exciting.
This is something that's pretty close to my heart as well. I actually, when I was in college, I was studying to be a teacher, and I have my degree in elementary and special education. And I was a special education teacher for 3 years when I graduated, with a focus on autism. And one of the most important things that I think I experienced was my first year as a teacher. I ended up teaching a pull-out room, right? So we took kids from second, third, fourth grade, pulled them out of the classroom, and brought them into their own special education room, right? And I would teach them reading and things of that nature. Well, the next 2 years, I was an inclusion teacher. So I was a teacher in a general classroom, fifth grade, and the special education students were in that classroom. I think that was a profound experience for me because it allowed me to help all the students embrace each other kind of as a family. And kids are really phenomenal in this regard because they're not jaded by society. And it's a really great example to see how a classroom of fifth graders doesn't see diversity the same way as maybe a group of 30 adults does. And I think if we look at children as an example sometimes and how to, kind of have that perspective, I think it's really great. So with that said, inclusion is great. I think exposure is really what brings that about. And I think similar to putting yourself in difficult situations to practice difficult things, I think we really need to go out of our way to create inclusion in our own lives. I think we need to seek out people with different opinions. I think we need to seek out people with different backgrounds. A lot of times you hear, well, at the dinner table, don't talk about, religion or politics, right? It creates issues. And I disagree. I don't think we need to ignore difficult issues that we have differences in. I think we need to embrace them. I think we need to work more on having a conversation in an appropriate way so that we can share our difference of opinion without being judgmental and without being attacking of others.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. Yeah, I think for one is we're going to see a movement. We are already seeing a movement. We're going to see even a greater and more sustained movement toward DEI frameworks being a part of the workplace. So much so that, like, we have seen individuals evaluate their prospective employer just as much as the employer evaluates a prospective employee. We're going to see those employee pools looking for organizations that really score high in areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, beyond again just how many people are you hiring, for certain reasons. So are you a group where you are inclusive, you treat each other fairly, those types of things. So we're moving to kind of an economy where these employees can look and be able to discover, is this the kind of place where I want to work, based on their DEI scorings and how they handle those things. I think that's important for organizations to understand. On the other hand of that, though, or hand in hand with that, I think it's also important for them to understand, like you said earlier, due to technologies that are becoming more and more rapidly available, individuals who they might not have considered before can be some of your best candidates for various reasons. But one, they can do the job and do it really, really, really well through the technology that is now available across the board to all these organizations. So I think we're going to see kind of a revolution, if that's not too strong of a word, Kevin, to use, revolution in how these organizations are going to feel, in some cases liberated by the fact that, okay, now we can expand hiring practices because of the technology that's available to us.
Well, because the pandemic has pretty much, just a year before, we were not, virtual interviews and virtual job fairs were pretty much unheard of. And now fast forward, another year, that's pretty commonplace. I think as long as we keep going that pace, we'll be more inclusive of everybody, that's in the job market. People with different strengths, people with different abilities provide different strengths to the organization. And I think that's one thing we're starting to see now with the pandemic, a lot more now, that diversity really has made us a whole lot more efficient and a whole lot more productive.
That's great. So I have a brother in Michigan that just got into leadership. He's a manager of a few people in a technology business. And he asked me the question, he says, Jason, give me some advice. Like, what's the first things that I should be doing as a new leader? Because naturally what we want to do is get involved in, setting up our office, making sure our computer systems are all straight, going through procedures and going through, different practices that we have, and then, coming up with some great plan. I don't think people really care about that kind of stuff as much as we might think they do. I think people care more about our willingness to be able to go and build a relationship with them, right? Are we able to put people above processes? So people-centric leadership is doing just that. It's focusing, it's recognizing that our number one job, our responsibility as a leader, is not necessarily saying how much of a profit we can get. It's more about developing relationships with those that we lead and helping them become better, which I think is exactly the attitude we need to have when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. This world cannot operate if we're all quarterbacks. If we're all the same, you can't have a good team, right? I mean, you need the quarterback, you need the receiver, there's multiple positions that we need, and everybody that comes to the table has strengths and skills. Naturally, as humans, we don't tend to focus on those very well at all. My son, 2 years ago, brought home a report card. And on that report card, he had a C- in math. Everything else was A's and B's, but math was a C-. Kevin, guess what the first thing is we focused on when we looked at the report card?
Math.
Exactly right, right. Hunts don't get C's. What are we gonna do about this, son? And we told him, we're gonna talk to the teacher and get more help in class and get more help after school and maybe get a private tutor and all that kind of stuff. The very best we can expect when we focus on his weaknesses is average. And nobody likes average. Average doesn't sell, average doesn't contribute. What would happen though if we looked at his grade in science? and his science grade was an A, and say, hey, you got an A there. What could we do to help you expand your knowledge, to deepen your skill set, to really focus on your strength in this area? Imagine where we could go with that. And when we look at diversity and inclusion, again, naturally, our mind just kind of goes to those weaknesses. You know, somebody might look at you, Kevin, and say, well, gosh, you know, there's this problem or this issue or this kind of challenge he might be facing on a daily basis. That's just kind of naturally where our brains go. But that's not how we need to look at it. We need to reverse that mentality and say, hey, everybody has strengths. Kevin, let's talk and figure out what your strengths are. And then I want to figure out how we can be able to expand and magnify these strengths. Honestly, you know, I mentioned from the onset that I've got a lot of respect for you because I think you've done that personally. I think you've recognized, hey, you know what? I've got a pretty good ability of thinking through questions. I've got a pretty good ability of asking people, you know, some things that might be a little bit personal. I've got a good ability of being able to carry on a conversation, of being able to, you know, voice my and express my opinions, of putting things together in writing, of using technology. You know, you saw those things as strengths, and look at what you're doing now. And imagine if every leader in every company looked at everybody through the lens of a strength instead of weaknesses. Diversity and inclusion would be a problem. It wouldn't even be a subject we talk about anymore, because we would naturally see, all right, that person's got this strength and this strength and this strength. Let's build this team together. We're going to move forward. We all would be involved.